Dr.
For the
Steve
recording,
Hassan
please.
with us to teach us. Um, he is a world-renowned expert on undue influence and cults, a mental health professional, speaker, consultant, author, and educator. He has been helping people leave destructive cults since 1976, after he was deprogrammed from Sun Myung Moon's Unification Church. He is the founding director of the Freedom of Mind Resource Center and author of 4 books. So I'm going to turn it over now to Steve.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking a little time this Sunday. Many of you are friends. We've known each other for a long time, but I wanted to start by just saying that I was raised in a conservative Jewish family in Flushing, Queens, 1.3 miles from Donald Trump's childhood home. And I was recruited into the Moonies cult in 1974, the same month that Patty Hearst was abducted by the Symbionese Liberation Army. And my family found me and deprogrammed me 2.5 years later after I nearly died in a van crash. And when I woke up, I was pretty horrified that I became a right-wing fascist who believed the Holocaust was justified and believed that democracy was satanic and that we needed a theocracy to rule the world. And I've been doing repair work ever since for the last 44 years and written 4 books. And the last one is called The Cult of Trump. And I want to do a shout out to Reb Moshe Waldox, who in 1998, I'm getting emotional, helped me find my roots again to Judaism. And Misha and myself and our son Matthew have been members of the shul ever since. So what I want to say today is the primary story of our community, of our tribe, is Moshe leading people from bondage in Mitzrayim, and this is what we're looking at least that's how I see it now, that there are 60 to 70 million Americans who have been indoctrinated into a fascist right-wing ideology. Some 60 million Americans currently think that the election was stolen still. And I've done a ton of interviews because people say, how do we deprogram so many millions of Americans? But the work that I've been doing my entire life is what I think everybody needs to know, and not just people who are in the Trump sphere, but everyone else needs to understand this topic, that we're not living in a post-truth world. We're living in the age of influence, and that we're human beings and our minds can be bent and twisted and lies believed as if it was true, and our whole personality and identity taken over. I've spent months researching QAnon. I have numerous blogs that I've done, including a TEDx talk with a number of other people called Dismantling QAnon. And what I really want to do today is I'm going to keep my comments pretty short, because I'd like to dialogue and answer questions from my community. But I do want to tell you that when I was in the Moonies cult, my family and my friends tried to argue rationally with me, tried to tell me that Moon was a cult leader. He was not the Mashiach. And I was programmed to do thought stopping, to block any negative thoughts, because I was so convinced that Moon was God's agent on Earth, that World War III was going to happen in 1977. And the more that people attacked me and said I was brainwashed and was in a cult, the deeper I got into the rabbit hole of the Moon cult. And I've been spending my life as a mental health professional advising family members and friends how to rescue loved ones from Scientology or Nexium or any number of other destructive cults. And the first thing that I say to them is you need to educate yourself about this phenomenon so you become educated agents and learn how to interact with your loved one in a way that's going to empower them to start questioning, and I talk about strategic interactive approach to do that. That's oriented to rapport and trust building, asking good questions in a thoughtful, respectful, non-confrontational way, and talking about social psychology and other cults as a stepping stone to build a platform to begin to engage somebody who has fallen down the rabbit hole. And this deals with every authoritarian cult group, religious, political, therapy, what say you. For me, the issue is authoritarianism. It's not right or left. And I saw a piece, I was interviewed by Katie Couric this week, and it's on her YouTube channel. I think there were 400,000 views this week, and Fox News did a segment against her, which I kind of liked because then they're telling everyone that Katie Couric did this thing, right? And she was on Bill Maher as well. But the what I'm trying to get at is that we can help people wake up, and people like myself, and there are millions of other former members of authoritarian cults in America. We need to amplify our voices. We need to destigmatize being involved with the Trump ideology and group. And there's so many things that we need to do, but the first step is to educate ourselves. And I assume that people who are on this call may have a relative or may have a friend who have espoused QAnon ideology or Trumpism ideology. And if you've cut off contact with them or blocked them on social media, my strongest advice is after Wednesday, when Biden and Harris are sworn in, to reach out and say, I miss you. To not say, ha ha, I told you so, you were wrong, I was right. That doesn't work. To have compassion, to have love, to have curiosity, because a lot of people are confused right now because Trump was thrown off of Twitter and social media, etc. Parler was taken offline. A lot of people are confused, and the agents who are going to have the most effect are family members and friends. You know? And I can't tell you how many of my friends who love my work are like, I don't know, I just couldn't stand listening to them anymore, so I just blocked them or I cut them off or whatever, because it was like a fire hose of propaganda. Have you heard that term, fire hose? That's from Putin. That's active measures. That's psyops, psychological warfare stuff that we've been subjected to. And not just from outside, but from within the Christian right, from the neo-Nazi groups. There's a whole group of number of cults that are in the cult of Trump, which is, and after a year of my book being out, everything has been validated. I even predicted there would be violence and he wouldn't want to leave the office. I'm hoping that people will read the book and educate themselves, educate their kids. I want to say one more thing and then just show you a couple of things from my website, and then we'll open it up. I did a Mayim Bailik's podcast. It's a new podcast. And in the interview, she said, I went to Jewish camp and they told me about the Moonies and they told us about cults. And I was reminded, yes, Jewish organizations from the 70s, 80s, and 90s were investing time and money in educational material to teach young Jews about mind control and cults. And the people who were doing that work got old, they retired, money dried up. There was an LA cult clinic in Los Angeles and New York, funded with therapists where people could call for help. No funding, closed. So one of the messages that I want to say is it's so easy to preventively inoculate people. We're all waiting for our vaccinations. We need an inoculation about destructive authoritarian mind control techniques and how cults operate and how the Trump cult got to where it got to. And with that, I'm going to just share screen for a second and show you. I have so many resources on my website. This is my website, freedomofmind.com. I recommend, if you're serious about learning about this, read Combating Cult Mind Control first, read Freedom of Mind second, and then read The Cult of Trump. I also want to say up here you can subscribe. I do a once a week newsletter about the weekly blog and whatever media I did that week with links of it. So anyone who's interested, under Learn About Undue Influence, you can look and see the stereotypical profiles of any cult leader: grandiose, self-centered behavior, fantasies of power, success, attractiveness, need for praise and admiration, sense of entitlement, lack of empathy. And the malignant part of narcissism is thinking you're above the law, pathological lying, interpersonally exploitative, sadistic, harassing and silencing, violent, paranoid, and inability to trust friends and families. And in chapter 3 of The Cult of Trump, I compare him with Sun Myung Moon, Hubbard, and Jim Jones, and a few other cult leaders. Very important to know. I want to next show you my influence continuum. For me, this needs to be studied and shared everywhere. And forgive me for sounding self-referencing, but if you understand that influence can be healthy and ethical or authoritarian and destructive, and you understand that here is informed consent, I have it down here in terms of groups, and this is about lying, you can just go through it and see it's an organizing principle to be able to, and we need to get back to, we're not in a post-truth world. Truth is still truth. Facts are facts. Science matters. I just did my doctoral dissertation, and I did a quantitative study with 1,044 subjects, and I did the bite model, which I'm about to show you. And it came out at very high statistical significance as a factor of control. So we're now calling it the bite model of authoritarian control as opposed to mind control. And again, because there's too much to cover in this short period of time, I'll just direct you to freedomofmind.com under Learn About Undue Influence, behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. And the more any person or group does that, the more destructive it is. It's really pretty clear and understandable, easy to convey to folks. And so I wanted to share that. I have stuff on trafficking. I have many blogs, many blogs on how to help people in the cult of Trump, and many issues that need to get fixed, and interviews with people who are experts. So this is an image of Moon's son, Sean Moon. You see, these are bullets over in his crown. He has a cult called, the website is rodofironministry.org. He brought a busload of people to DC on the 6th, and I have a tweet of his saying it was Antifa doing all of the violence. So that and his family has a gun factory in Pennsylvania, and they make pistols, the Kahr Arms, Kahr. So the cult has been around, the Moonies. They have the Washington Times newspaper. They're still very involved. Scientology's involved. Falun Gong, who does the Epoch Times, is another cult in the cult of Trump. I really urge you. So if you really want to know more about the book and you don't want to necessarily jump to read it, you can look on my blog for my book talk when it first came out at Brookline Booksmith. I know Moshe was there and a number of my friends from TBZ were there, but I really go over like the key things from the book, so you can watch that video and look at that blog. So there is hope, but we have a lot of work to do. But we need to, once Biden and Harris are sworn in, we're going to be able to get back to some sanity, and science matters. I see that Eric Lander is now going to be given a cabinet level appointment as cabinet minister of science, I believe, scientific advisor for the administration. Science matters. So that's a new hashtag, science matters. And I'm involved with a group of former members. We're doing I Got Out and trying to copy the Me Too movement of, if you're in a cult, tell people your story, whether it was a controlling relationship, a controlling boss, a multi-level marketing cult, a religious cult, whatever. Let's normalize that not stupid people get into these authoritarian cults, but anybody can be lied to and tricked, hypnotized, and indoctrinated into insanity. So with that, I'd like to do some questions and answers. I have lots more to say, but trust me, my website has a ton of great resources for all of you. So Rav Tiferet, do you want to call on folks, or shall I do it?
Well, I see Ken has his hand up. Ken Rosenstein.
Yes, Ken.
Hey, Rav Tiferet, it was great to see you at Ohalam, and thank you so much, Steve, for this wonderful presentation. One question I have is, a friend of mine is very open-minded and spiritual, and she engages with people who are Trumpists. And one person made a comment about the election and he made a comment about where's the evidence that Trump incited people? And my friend wanted to engage with him on a real human level and find out his story. And that's what I had suggested. And she said that this person was resisting being personal and giving his background. And so that seems to me the real basis of establishing dialogue is getting into the personal. But if people aren't willing to do that, how do we engage them? That's one question. And the other question I have is, how can the Democrats do the work that they need to do to really meet these people's needs? How can Democrats as a party engage people if they're resistant to opening up and telling their stories? So that's basically what I'm wondering about. And thank you so much.
Thank you for your good questions. So I'm a mental health professional, and if anyone's listening, if you are too, you know that one of the most important things you need to do initially is create a therapeutic alliance with your client so that you can build some trust. So you don't jump into talking about very incendiary things where they're so fearful. I mean, literally in the Moonies, I need to share this quick story. I was taken to see the Exorcist movie with several hundred Moonies. Then we were brought up to Tarrytown to the headquarters, and Moon gave a lecture about how God made the Exorcist. This movie was a prophecy of what would happen to us if we left the Unification Church. And after I had that experience, because I did venerate Moon and I did think he was the greatest spiritual leader in human history and was sinless and did mass weddings because we were gonna have sinless children, all that, because I had so much phobias in my head that everything got filtered by either helping God, which was pro-Moon, or negative, and that was labeled Satan. You've heard Trump say fake news, enemy of the people. Members are programmed against negative stuff. So my advice, if you want to help somebody, don't start by talking about Trump. Find out who they were before they even knew Trump existed. Did they like music? Oh, what kind of music? Who was your favorite band? You like sports? Me too. Which ones? I like basketball. How about you? Find common areas. And this is another point I want to mention, which I didn't, but in the American Psychiatric Association Diagnostic Manual, there's a category for brainwashing and cults and coercive persuasion. It's a dissociative disorder, number 300.15. And the reason I'm mentioning this is think about Steve Hassan of Flushing, Queens, who wrote poetry and played basketball. Then he met the Moonies. He was deceived by women who were flirting with him. I was not looking to join a new religion. In fact, I asked, are you part of a religious group? Oh, no, not at all. Total lie. But this cult identity then got created through all the indoctrination, but the real Steve was still there. So even though my family and friends were interacting with this fanatic, I was still in there. I was just suppressed by my cult identity. And it's a key point of why I'm so hopeful, because if I could get out and I was such a fanatic, and yes, I would have killed on command, I would have died on command as a Moonie. That's how I was trained. I was explicitly said, by the way, if North Korea invades South Korea, the Americans are going to be sent to the front lines so they get killed, so we can get America into war to protect South Korea. Okay, so I had drank that potion of indoctrination. So understanding that, go back to if it's a friend or a family member before they ever heard of Trump. Hey, I miss playing chess with you. I miss fishing with you. Hey, as soon as the pandemic is over, I can't wait to hang out together. And avoid the cult stuff at first until there's some warmth where you can activate the person's real self. Does that make sense? Did I answer Ken's 2 points? And the best thing is to reach out to people you know. People you genuinely care about. I see Chris Ives and then Sergey. Chris, you're up.
Yeah, just piggybacking on Ken's question, I have a couple relatives who in recent years have become very ardent Trump supporters. And when I think about how to approach them, I want to make sure that I don't assume that they are involved in a cult of Trump. And so I think there is a cult of Trump, but presumably not all of the 70 plus million people that voted for him can be seen as cult members, even though maybe tens of millions of them actually are by your criteria. And so one question is, to what extent or what percentage of Trump supporters do you think are kind of in a cult of Trump, as opposed to people that are not in a cult of Trump, but simply voted for him 4 years ago, for example, thinking, I'm an unemployed steel worker in Pittsburgh. I think Trump more than Clinton will get me a job. or
Right.
I have issues with abortion in 2020, and for that reason, I'm voting for Trump, not for Biden, even though a lot of the rest of the stuff around Trump scares the heck out of me. How do you sort that? Like when I think about my relatives, what would your criteria be for, is this relative voting for Trump for certain reasons I may not agree with, or is this relative really caught up in a cult here?
It's a great question, and all of my work is about customization to whatever the family is calling me for advice, and find out who has the best connection. Often I get calls from family when everyone's estranged from the cult member, and then I think, okay, who's the best person to begin reaching out and saying, I miss you, let's connect again. I really, I apologize if I've said anything hurtful to you in the past. And really be ready to listen. And I want to plug a book that I really love by Celeste Headley called We Need to Talk. I recommend it as an audiobook, which is how I listen to her read it. But it has nothing to do with cults, but it's about listening and how to connect with people and how to really not be thinking what the answer is, but to actually wait till the person says their thought. There's a lot of great tips in that. Also, to answer your question, this is on my website. It's in the Cult of Trump, but it's an attempt at a graphic.
Oh, there it is.
To talk about who's influencing Trump. Trump is a very uneducated person, and there are powerful forces manipulating him, and it's these forces who are his base. So at the point that Pat Robertson says that Trump no longer has God's blessing, a whole lot of people are not going to be believing that God is, behind Trump. And so for each, sub-cult that's in the cult of Trump, there's a different orientation. I have friends who are former neo-Nazis who do reach out work to help people. And you saw, I'm sure, the same T-shirts and signs on the 6th that are anti-Semitic things. Anyone who says there's a cult of Soros is in the cult of Trump, in my opinion. As a Jew, this was Russian propaganda, and Lyndon LaRouche's original conspiracy theory was against George Soros. That's a clue. But I want to say this. I take the position with people of, hey, you're an intelligent person. You're educated. I respect you. I really want to understand how you've come to the beliefs that you currently have. Would you be willing to share them with me? And honestly, if you can persuade me that your point of view is factual and correct, I'm willing to change my mind. I take that frame instead of I'm right, you're wrong, you're a sucker, I'm smart. Like, that's not going to help at all. And the people who are going to help get the cult out is the real person. Empower the real person. And another thing of my book, Freedom of Mind, that I talk about is teaching and sharing videos about social psychology experiments. For example, the Asch conformity study, or the Milgram obedience study, or the Zimbardo prison study. And you share a link and you say, hey, I just watched this video of this group of people who were shown these lines, and 2/3 start giving the wrong answer within an hour, when they can see with their own eyes what the correct answer is. What do you think? Like, that's science. It's not attacking Trump, but it's educating people about how much we're wired to conform to people we identify with. Or to show the Milgram obedience study, which was the phony shock machine, where people are electrocuting other people in an hour because a stranger with a white coat, who's the authority figure, is telling them they have no other choice. Right? So you can use that. I find the most success with people in the cult of Trump talking about Chinese communist brainwashing and trafficker brainwashing. pimps and traffickers. They all use the bite model. They all deceptively recruit. They systematically break people that, their psychological profile down and build them up in the image that they want. Educate them about these other cults and ask them what they think. All of these things are going to help their authentic self to begin to reality test. And right now it's the media, the Fox News, and the GOP lawmakers who are saying that the election was stolen. These are the people who need to be held accountable. And somebody said, I think it was Katie Couric on Bill Maher, said that the GOP has to be deprogrammed. But for me, the thing is, educate everybody. All lawmakers need to understand the influence continuum, the bite model, understand the dissociative disorder, and have a framework that I know works. This was my life work. Does that answer your question, Chris?
Yeah, I think just to follow up a little bit, I think those are great strategies. Thank you. Once you determine that this person is engaging with Trump in a cult-like manner, but how do you determine that before that stage? Again, there may be people that voted for Trump who are not in a cult-like manner with him. Again, they have certain interests. I'm rich, I don't want to be taxed. I'm anti-choice, I want to stack the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade. And a lot of those people may see Trump as a cult leader, maniac, dangerous guy, right, but they're not caught up in the cult of Trump. They're just right, maybe a one-issue voter. So how do we distinguish? I think what you said is great. Once we're clear someone's in the Trump cult.
You just ask them, Chris.
Yeah.
You say, hey, what do you think? What's going on? What do you think about what's happening? What do you think of Biden? What do you think of the election? I find Chris Krebs, who was the cybersecurity appointee by Trump, incredibly credible spokesperson about the fact that the election wasn't rigged, and other Republican people. But I want to tell you the most powerful technique in my deprogramming, which took 5 days, was the one person who wasn't an ex-Moonie, and his name is Gary, may he rest in peace, or may his memory be a blessing. He would come in and he'd say, what do you think, Steve? What do you think about what you just heard? And then he'd wait. And in retrospect, I realized I was telling them how to get me out. It's like, the Bible's not going to work. I'm Jewish. Talking about Jesus has no relevancy to me. The Chinese communist brainwashing, that's creating some conflict, because I think we're of God and the Chinese communists are Satan, but we're doing the same techniques of brainwashing. That was a point. You know what I'm saying? The best way is to get in there, reestablish contact, find content that's non-controversial, and then just feel them out. And they may just want to verbalize. And if they say, I feel awful that I voted for him, you go, a lot of people voted for him. The important thing is to move on, because we need to rebuild America. We need to rebuild a community of trust where we can agree when something's a fact or it's a lie. And I hate media people who say, we're living in a post-truth world. It's like, we're not. It's still, truth still matters. Science still matters. Please, get educated. Okay, Sergey's next.
Hi, Steve. Good to see you again. And I'm a big fan of your work. Really very important work, and especially the last book. I have two questions that are very different. First question is related to, so let me ask it. So if you could, as you remember, you know my background, I grew up in communist Romania, so I lived for 24 years there. So I had all the benefits of being, educated in a place where, of course, a lot of indoctrination was going on, and Romania happened to have had probably the worst dictatorships in Eastern Europe.
Yep.
So there's a relation in my head that I'd like you to spell it out, because obviously you have the language and the knowledge. between cults, including, the cult of Trump or any other cults, and regimes that are actually authoritarian or dictatorships. Political regimes, such as.
If I can interrupt you, because I see a ton of questions and we only have like 23 minutes, but I want to just say this applies to political dictatorships.
Okay.
So I have Putin as head of the Russian cult, in the Cult of Trump book, because authoritarianism is authoritarianism, and they all do the bite model stuff. They want to control behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions, and make people dependent and obedient.
So basically what you're saying is essentially the same general phenomenon.
Exactly, except when you have state apparatus for propagandizing like Russia has with the RT. Alex Jones, I wrote in my book, and this is a year old, but Alex Jones took 1,000 disinformation stories from RTTV. He broadcast it. It got picked up by Breitbart. Then it got picked up by Fox. Then it got reported by centrist and left-wing media at Look at Them. But they were still broadcasting disinformation. They were amplifying lies. And that's not what we need to do. If we want to be strategic, we need to really think about the impact on the public, about what we're amplifying. And I don't think you give equal time to a lie to facts. That is not good journalism. This is not good media. And we need to get out of the mindset that is being promoted. Sergey, anything quick? Because there's so many other questions.
The question is a recommendation on how to handle or relate to conservative Jews, including, modern Orthodox and other kinds of conservative Jews, who are actually big embracers of Trumpism.
I am not an expert, and I can tell you that I really had a crisis of conscience when working on the Cult of Trump book, whether to include Netanyahu and Chabad, and I opted to include them as members of the Cult of Trump. I know that's very controversial, but Putin's rabbi is a Chabad rabbi. And a lot of influence is coming from Putin to Israeli Jews. A lot of emigres in Israel, they're watching RTV and feeding off of this propaganda. And I really, like TBZ, we believe that in love and truth and justice, and not authoritarianism and fear and depriving people of human rights. And for me, the big picture is really survival of the human species, not just America, but our planet. The pandemic is proving that we're all interconnected and we really need to care about others and not have this isolationist, elitist, we're special, we're exceptional, we're Americans stuff. So that's dangerous. Who else? Who else? I'm sorry. Is Rabbi Tiferet here? Who else had their hand up first? I haven't been able to track everybody.
I do. Tommy Schemacher.
Thank you, Rabbi Tiferet. Steve.
Yes, Farron.
Hi.
My friend.
So you're talking a lot about the way to approach a loved one who. What happens when we're not talking, when the person is not a loved one, on a broader sort of societal level? And personally, I encountered this in my political work and in activism and phone calling and door knocking, and I was not successful. And are there different strategies when you're dealing with a person who is not your loved one, who you can rely on that relationship?
It's always different if it's somebody new, but the techniques of influence are all, really there are hundreds of techniques of influence Pretty dress you're wearing today, Fran. Mind if I ask you a question? You look like someone who really cares about our future and your children. Am I correct? Yes, I care about my children. So, what do you see as the biggest threat to your children's future? I'm just curious. And you put your hands up like this, placating. Tell me about that. There's a million techniques of how to be effective, but you don't think about a home run, knockout punch in 1 hour or less. People have been indoctrinated over months and years. So really understand this is not a quick fix. That said, when I had my awakening moment, it was like a light bulb. I described it like someone opening the Venetian blinds and the sun comes in. It was like that. I was listening to a podcast with a QAnon fanatic yesterday, and he too said when he realized that they were wrong, it was like the bubble burst and he was done. Like understanding that you trusted the wrong person. For me, that light bulb moment was realizing Moon was a liar. Even though I had heard him lie hundreds of times as a member. And the way that moment at 5 days of deprogramming was they asked me to read one of his published speeches and just asked me, what do I think? And in it, he was lying to congressmen and senators, say how he was surprised that Americans could be brainwashed by a Korean and how much he respects Americans. Because I heard him trash Americans for 2.5 years. The minute I had a conscious doubt that he was a liar, then my mind said, well, then I can't trust him. And we're teaching a God of truth. So if God's a God of truth, he's a liar. He can't be a representative of God. Like those were my initial waking up moments in 1976. And then I started crying for 3 hours. Who's next? Tommy?
Sheila's next.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Rabbi Tiferet. Sorry.
Hi, Stephen. So, yeah, I've tried to approach people, even agreeing with them. It didn't go well, but I probably have to work a little better on
lower your expectations. Just go for rapport and trust. Just smile and try to get them to smile once.
I just wanted to ask, because when Trump got the presidency, I immediately, within a few months, was calling the Democratic National people in DC and, various state places, and even some really wealthy people I knew who were Democrats, sending letters and saying, we need to get busy now educating people because this is a total mess. And most places, the Democratic Party, et cetera, said, oh, don't worry, we'll work on it someday. And I knew what was going to happen is they really wouldn't work on it until a year before, which is, I'm asking you, instead of taking it one by one, hoping that maybe we can reach out, is there something more larger, that we can educate on a bigger level? And I'll just quickly say this, such as, and I really can't remember my history very well, but when Roosevelt got on and did his fireside chats, I understand it was very cathartic. But it also taught people things like, in 15 minutes, he taught them the banking system, not that it doesn't take years of study, but he whittled it down and people felt comfort from hearing him explain things they didn't understand. So I'm asking, is there anything on a bigger scale that you suggest or anyone doing?
I have pages of things that need to be done, and it's going to take money and resources, but absolutely it's going to be crucial, in my opinion, for how to heal and how to go forward in a way that we never have an authoritarian operate the way that this has happened. So there are many things that need to be done.
Don't you think Biden would do really well with fireside chats, healing people?
I don't know. Maybe Kamala Harris, maybe some spokesperson. I mean, but the definitely messaging from the presidency in a way that undermines the narrative that he's a pedophile trafficker who is eating blood from children. He needs to also do things, as Chris was saying. He needs to give money to people to help them live. He needs to demonstrate what real leadership is by getting the vaccination out and into people's arms as quickly as possible. That's another thing. We have to deal with all the indoctrination, disinformation about the vaccination and the conspiracy with Bill Gates.
At this point.
What's that?
You don't know anyone at this point that is doing a larger scale teach-in.
No, I've been waiting patiently. I've been largely, except for one 3-minute segment on CNN with Brian Stelter and one 3-minute thing with Mary Trump on Joy Ann Reid's show a few weeks ago. I've been waiting. People are calling it the cult. People are saying they need to deprogram. But I'm waiting to get the nod, so to speak, from the doers and the shakers. But please understand, there are authoritarian cults that have infiltrated our government, our media, our law enforcement, our intelligence agencies. And so there's a bigger structural problem that we need to address. We know that Russia hacked into our infrastructure, cyber warfare wise. And we don't know how bad it is, but it's been bad because it was going on for months. So we've got a lot of work to do. But for our children's sake, we need to do everything we can as quickly as we can.
Thanks. Okay. Thanks.
Rabbi Tiferet, who's next? Oh, Ken Reich. Can we ask Ken, my buddy? Ken, you have to unmute.
It is, but it's not.
Ken, you have to unmute, buddy. It's on the lower left.
There we go. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for your books, for everything you've done for this talk. So I'm following up on a couple of questions from before. So I don't know what your view is. My view is that there can't be 75 million cult members out there. I mean, cult members the way you've defined them, but there is some significant number of people that are in a cult-like state of not, willing to believe, even when 50 states certify the election, that there's
the number this morning is 60 million still think that the election was stolen.
60, yeah. So the question is, doing it one by one, as Sheila said and others have said, boy, that's a lengthy process, and can we do it? But what if Trump disappears from the scene, and nobody comes up to replace him that has the same kind of magical TV evangelistic P.T. Barnum type qualities? Will people who've been in this cult, who you would consider cult members, will they tend to get out of that cult without a total deprogramming?
Because most people will leave after Biden is sworn in my opinion. I saw Ron Suskind interviewed, and he estimated that after Trump is criminally charged, and this was even before the impeachment talk, he estimated we would be dealing with 15 million hardcore willing to die or commit violence for Trump in the United States. But 15 million people, there's a lot of people.
Yeah. But at least it's hopeful that a lot of these people aren't going to need the kind of deprogramming that you specialize in, each one individually, to maybe...
I can't do it, obviously. I'm one person, right? So families have to roll up their sleeve, and communities need to get together. I would love to see GBIO give a talk to GBIO for all their leaders to educate their their members. I'd love to see us really collaborating in intelligent ways for how to take the small resources and expand them. And the influence continuum in the bite model, it's now got scientific validity. I'm open for it to be challenged and all of that, but that could actually become used in algorithms for Facebook and Twitter and others to discern disinformation and whether something's authoritarian leaning or not. I'm nervous about government censorship, but we also need to think about the public good and the community and come up with things that make sense. But I want to restate, for me, the problem is authoritarianism, not right or left. We need, because there are authoritarians on the left, as is witnessed by China is a communist, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great work.
Leah's next.
Hi,
Hi, Leah.
how are you doing?
Good.
Thank you for what you're doing. I have a question that relates to what you just said. And, you know, we all venerate freedom of speech. But just as people say that the right to bear arms can be interpreted in different ways, I'm wondering if we shouldn't be pushing our Congress people to think about redefining freedom of speech so that places like Parler and now, well, Twitter already got rid of Trump, but the fact is that the people that are spouting a lot of these things, that's all they read, that's all they look at. And I just want to give one example. I've been writing to someone for 10 years. I know him well. And he said, you can send me anything you want, but I know that Trump won the election. He absolutely believes it. I've tried to send things.
Yeah.
We're friendly on other bases.
Yeah, no, I would say, please convince me. Show me the evidence.
Well, I've tried that, but my point is, what about the bigger picture of saying freedom of speech is maybe too expensive and it can't be free?
So freedom of speech, if I can interrupt you just because we're running out of time, Leah, the law says we're not free to yell fire in a crowded theater if there's no fire. Why? Because community public health is more important than someone saying, well, I feel like saying fire. So that same legal principle needs to be applied. Exactly. And I want to state categorically, I read a big book called Kochland about the Koch brothers, and they have installed over 50 years all kinds of think tanks and endowed chairs and universities for free speech. But why were they doing this? Because they had fossil fuels and they wanted free speech to say it's a hoax instead of going with the science that says climate change, that human involvement is real. That's not free speech, in my opinion. That's crying fire when there is no fire, or it's the better analogy is the tobacco industry saying there's no evidence of cancer when they knew for decades that it caused cancer. It's like we need to hold corporations accountable for things that are hurting the public good.
And laws. We need laws.
So I did my doctoral dissertation. I went back to school at age 63 because I realized the law doesn't have criteria for undue influence that is universally applicable. And my dissertation tries to connect all the models about brainwashing, the undue influence laws in California. There's actually undue influence to protect elderly in California, trafficking laws, federal laws, because those are huge overlap, and my bite model. And I feel like what the big missing piece has been the law going, yeah, this is unethical influence. This is harmful. Right. This is even criminal if somebody does a criminal act because they've been unduly influenced. So I'm hoping people will read my dissertation. It's online for free. And especially lawyers. I know Ken has been a big supporter of mine when I was opposing Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court. And I did a whole analysis on the People of Praise as an authoritarian cult interviewing former members. But, you know, the politics was the politics. But again, it comes back to we need to be hopeful, we need to be resourceful, we need to work together intelligently, we need to channel our resources in effective ways. We need to do preventive education, we need to develop things to do interventions, and we need recovery resources. We need to train law enforcement and the media, we need to train politicians. Everyone needs to understand this because we live in the 21st century. By the way, has anyone seen the Social Dilemma documentary too? Watch the Social Dilemma, watch The Great Hack, watch People You May Know, and you'll understand how people are being mind controlled remotely. That's what's happening. I was recruited at campus at the cafeteria. People are being recruited online now. And we need to understand the effects of how hypnosis works, for example, where it bypasses our critical thinking and installs things in our head that we would never agree to if we knew up front what it was really about.
So, Steve, we have Tommy Schnurmacher, who is also going to be following in your footsteps. He'll be here in this time spot next Sunday.
Great.
He's got a question.
Hey, Tommy.
Hi, Stephen. An amazing book. I read it from cover to cover. Spectacular. You absolutely pegged it. When I was reading the book, I was just concerned about, so many people seem to like Trump, and it seems to be a cult. And I read the book, but then much more recently, a couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation with a cousin who lives in South Bend, Indiana. And never mind Trump, as he was talking about him, it sounded, I said, what's next? Do you actually believe in the QAnon? You're not buying into the QAnon things, are you? So he writes back to me and sends me a video of a girl who's a survivor of a American snuff movie. He believes in the fact that children are kidnapped by American government officials and tortured and boiled to death and he 100% believes in this. So what I'm asking you is, what happened to my cousin, and where do I begin? Like talking about other topics instead?
Get educated. Before you start talking, get educated. I did 3 blogs on QAnon, a couple of others on conspiracy theories and how to talk to people with them. This is not something that, a lot of things are counterintuitive, believe it or not. And so, it's kind of ready, aim, fire instead of fire, 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 and then recalibrate. It's better to go slow but sure and build warmth. And as I was saying, take a frame of, look, you're an intelligent person, you're educated, I respect you. If you believe this, that means something to me. You're not saying it's true, you're saying this is important. I get that. Help me step into your shoes. Tell me what you watched that convinced you of this. Let me look at it. Let us discuss it together. I'll watch one of yours, you watch one of mine, but the deal is we have to discuss it after. But you got to start by learning about cults in general. And I really recommend Combating. If you like the Cult of Trump, read Combating Cult Mind Control, and then my book for families and friends, How to Get Someone Out of a Cult, called Freedom of Mind.
Thank you. Thank
sure.
you very much.
Wow, the hour went by really fast. I'm willing to stay a little longer if it's okay with you, Rav Tiferet. Otherwise, we can wrap up and we can do another one sometime.
It's fine with me. And in the world of Zoom etiquette, we're all adults. If you have somewhere else that you have to go, feel free to leave. It's not rude behavior.
So I can stay for another half hour if anyone would, has a burning question, and I'll keep answering them. But truly, I literally, I'm going to just share this really fast one more time with my website and share. So if you go to resources, the Cult of Trump media page, these are the interviews I've done in the last year. If you want to hear more, it's been a very busy year. So there's a ton of stuff on my website for people who want to know more, including YouTube videos. Hey, Bernie. Love you. Next question. David.
Hi, Steve. Thanks. This has been an amazing presentation and discussion. One thing, you've touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to hear more your thoughts on the one hand, I understand that the emphasis is on building relationships, building trust, reaching out with love. How does that work together with holding people accountable for destructive actions?
Great question. So I saw the guy with the horns with the anti-Semitic tattoos was arrested. I think his name is Jake or something. And his lawyer said Trump should pardon him because he came at the president's invitation. Okay, that was in the news a day or two ago. I don't know is the quick answer. I can tell you I've thought a lot about it, because I could have been at that January 6th thing. If I was still in the Moonies, I could have been there shooting or killing police. That's how far gone my critical thinking was and how my identity was so fervent. I'm pretty sure as a society, we need to hold people accountable for criminal actions. And so they should be tried and they should be found guilty if they've done something like kill someone or punch someone in the head. But the question then becomes, what's an appropriate sentence? And are they remorseful? Have they understood now that they were mind controlled? And I've always taken the position, with terrorists like Tsarnaev, to quote the Boston Marathon bomber, from the beginning, it appeared to me that his older brother had convinced him. He was a pothead who was a wrestler and loved girls. He was not a Muslim fanatic. I always had the feeling, why can't he speak out against...
3 boxes. Okay.
Excuse me? Tommy, you have to mute, buddy. Why can't he be in jail for a period of time, but speak out to tell people not to fall for it like he fell for it and be used to encounter terrorist work? But with the Islamic terrorists who are suicide bombers, they want to be found guilty and killed. That was how they were indoctrinated. Bringing in Muslim clerics to tell them that they're going to hell because they violated the Quran, that would be better. And again, but the point is I'm not a judge or a jury, but I do think that we need to hold people accountable. But then the question is, are they a danger to society? Would they be better served to be let out on probation, working to repay the victim's family if they truly aren't a threat anymore? I don't know. But there's a big debate that's been happening in the world with former ISIS people, including American citizens and women and children, and they're being treated as if they are still a danger, a terrorist danger. But there's no formulaic deprogramming process that the government has to address people who've been taken in by terrorist cults yet either. So we have a lot to do. Anyone else?
Patricia.
Okay, Patricia.
There we go. I'm unmuted. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for your work and for being here and giving us your time repeatedly. I was wondering earlier, I don't remember who said something about, so if we get rid of Trump and he's removed off Twitter and has lost his megaphones, but what about the cult of patriarchy and white supremacy? So someone else will take his place. There will be plenty of people to bear that, pick up the flag. So how do we work against, is there within what you're talking about some way to, how do we educate against white supremacy, patriarchy with your model, or can you speak to that of Trumpism?
Yeah. So it really comes down to really customizing a strategic approach to a particular sub cult. So with white supremacists, neo-Nazis, the most effective communicators are former members, in my opinion. But we still need to educate their family and friends, because that's their support system when they get out of it. And they've often burned their bridges with their family and friends when they get into one of these groups. So I keep telling my families, love is stronger than mind control. Educate yourself so that you can have compassion and sympathy for their loved one instead of anger or judgment. And I do believe deep down inside, nobody likes to be exploited, and nobody likes to be abused, and nobody likes to admit that they're wrong. I mean, I had to put my tail between my legs when I woke up and just apologize to everybody. And I hurt a lot of people when I got in. And I had a lot of apologizing to do, but fortunately, nobody pressured me to apologize. They knew I needed time. My next door neighbor, Monica, one of my best friends, baked me some chocolate chip cookies and said, "Welcome home."
Thank you.
Jan.
Hi, Steve. Thank you so much for what you're doing, the work you're doing, and for being willing to share with us all. And we're very blessed to have you in our community. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I'm thinking what you're saying. It's one by one, but I'm thinking of the systemic possibilities of how we change the society so that people can think for themselves. And I've been thinking a lot about the education system. And I know you mentioned two things. You mentioned preventative education, which I'd love to hear what you mean by that. And the other is critical thinking. And I know that so much of education, I've been an educator my whole career, is about rote. It's rote. This is, here's the question and here are the answers, and you take the test, and it's kind of the notes of the teacher passing to the notes of the students without troubling the minds of either very much. And suddenly, kids have learned how to regurgitate, but they haven't learned how to think. And so I've been thinking all morning about wanting to contact the new minister of of education, from the
cabinet of the education cabinet.
Yeah, the guy from Connecticut who was the superintendent, to see what the schools can do to encourage teachers and to do teacher training on how to get the kids to really, high school kids in particular, start younger, but I'm thinking the next generation of voters, to think critically so
Yep.
that they look at this information and this crap that's being spewed out there and know how to decipher, how to, to show them. You could show them in history where democracy failed. You can give that as an example and take it out of the American context. And that's a really good way to do it, because it's kind of distancing them from from the moment and allowing them to think about that event and say, oh my God, this was terrible. But also to get them to think that how many ways they can view a particular issue and problem, and how do they learn to decipher that. So when they hear things about children being eaten or whatever, pedophiles in the Democratic Party, they can think about, well, maybe I should check another source.
Yeah, so I have a lot of ideas. I will just mention two. One of my mentors, Philip Zimbardo of Stanford University, who taught a course for 15 years, The Psychology of Mind Control, and he used 2 chapters from Combating Cult Mind Control. That should be, that whole curriculum, that's not for young kids, but that is a college level course at Stanford that should be taught at every university. But I want to say that he's been working on something called the Heroic Imagination Project for a really long time. I think the website is heroicimagination.org. And it's a curriculum. He's gotten more traction outside of the US than in the US. But if I had Biden's ear, or Joe Biden, who's a teacher, that should be in every school in the country, because there are little modules of video that explain social psychology with questions to discuss with the students about it, that explain a lot of the underpinning of how the human mind works and social psychology works. So that's an easy one, because the curriculum exists. We may need to adapt it to different age groups, but that one is an immediate plus. And I'm in one of them, disclosure, because he does have one thing on cults in it. I've been watching something on National Geographic channel called Brain Games. I don't know if anyone has heard of it, but it's a series of things explaining how our brains work and how we think we know everything, and in fact our unconscious is doing models and heuristics unconsciously, and how our perceptual mechanisms are missing a lot of what is reality. So what I'm trying to talk about is there's interesting videos that can be an incredible tool for everyone to learn, but also to share with kids. There's more, but the bottom line is developmentally appropriate education. And again, if you haven't seen the Great Hack documentary, The Social Dilemma, and People You May Know, I actually did a blog on the 3 of them saying, if you want to know mind control in the 21st century, watch these 3 things, because basically the Great Hack was about Cambridge Analytica stealing all of this detailed personal data on Americans, and that information being used to target voters on their hot button issues that they identified with. The Social Dilemma has former executives from Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram talking about AI and how it's programming people to keep their attention on their platform and not go somewhere else. It's very interesting and well done. Tristan Harris, the former Google ethicist, is the center person of that. And People You May Know, which is on Amazon, is about these data collectors who take the personal data and sell it to people so they can recruit people into their cults and into their churches. So if you Google, what do you do if you're depressed? That data is linked to your IP, and they know you're having mental health issues, or someone that you know is. And that information is now being used by AI to influence us, to sell us to whoever is paying for it. And it's the most frightening thing. But I really get how people can be in QAnon, because it's all based on what's called alternate reality gaming system, with these drops that people want to solve the problem. And I did in my TEDx talk, Dismantling QAnon, I had one of the founders of alternate reality gaming, Jim Stewartson, explain how it works. And QAnon is an alternate reality game, except that it's unethical and it's being used for political tools. Anything else? How are we doing? We got 10-15 minutes left. Any other thoughts or questions?
That's the end of our queue.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I'm gonna go grab something to eat, but it's an honor to connect with my community, and I miss you all, and I can't wait for my vaccination. I wish Governor Baker gets his act together soon so that we can have a rollout like in New York, where my relatives have already gotten their first shot, and we have nothing set up for us plus 65s yet that I can see. So thank you, Rav Tiferet, for organizing it, and thank you for your good questions. And let's I'm going to be so relieved after Wednesday at 12:01. It's been a really hard 4 years. As a former cult member, it's been really rough, because I know what I know, and I know what he is about, and I've been trying to tell people. So, thank you.